Welcome to Ham and Jam, the World War II British Airborne podcast, hosted by Andy Bryant and Kevin Getz.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Ham and Jam. I'm Andy Bryant, and I'm joined as ever by my good mate from the States, the king of questions, Kevin Getz. How you doing, Kev?
Andy, I'm doing quite well, my friend, or as I should say, I'm the number 2 pilot in this horse, where you are the number 1 since you're staff.
Well, yeah.
Don't crash us.
Well, it's nice to be in charge for a while.
So, as if I need to even ask, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm not going to lie, because you always sort of manage to find me out. Yes, I'm drinking a Guinness.
I was going to say, don't lie to the policeman either.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
Oh, well, I will let you know the affidavit is all ready to go. I just need to change dates and times. I'm drinking a Boddington's. So,
Cheers.
Cheers. We've had our D-Day series, and our listeners know, if they've been following us on the socials, I guess that's what the kids call it now. You made an extraordinary trip across the channel, and I think it's a great opportunity for our listeners who've never been to understand what exactly you were doing there, and just kind of talk about what that trip was like for you.
Yeah, sure. So in other words, it's going to be a spitballing episode. Obviously, I went to Normandy, but I think we're also going to chuck in a few other bits and pieces. We've got some news. So treat this episode as almost like a heads up of what's been going on and what's coming along down the road. But yes, so Normandy. Well, as we record this episode, I have literally got back yesterday from Normandy. My flat at the moment looks like a cross between a laundry and an army surplus store. But yeah, what a week. It was fantastic. I was there for the 80th, which I thought was brilliant. But in some ways, being there and it not being one of the big anniversaries was even better, because there weren't so many crowds. We could get around a heck of a lot easier.
I know you've been there, and I've asked this before of Michael and Jane and Carrie, who've been extraordinary guests on the podcast. And I've always asked them, when you make repeated trips, do you get the same feeling that you do? I don't know how many times you've been over there. I know it's much easier for you to get over there than, say, me, but does it still hold the same meaning to you? Do you still get the same feeling as you had when you first went there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Obviously, the first time is always the one you remember the most, probably. As I say, you never forget your first time and all that. But yeah, I absolutely, every time I go, every time, it's just such a buzz. Even if you go to, I mean, this came up in conversation. We went to the Pegasus Memorial Museum at the bridge. Again, I mean, I've been in there a dozen times, you know, so have a lot of the other lads. But you go in there, and when you're researching, you find something new, or you'll see something different that you've missed. You're going to the same places, you're going to the same museums, perhaps. You're still learning. And this is with Tom, what he had done with our other mate, Rob. They'd done a lot of research before we went into places we hadn't been to before, and scouring the internet to do then and now. Little obscure places like dressing stations out of the way. You know, that was just somebody's house back in 1944, but it was turned into a dressing station. And they found these photographs. You go there and do these then and now pictures. We found the location of the quarry where Montgomery was there giving out awards to members of 6th Airborne and other formations. The quarry's gone, but we found the entrance to it, and we were able to match up a photograph of him leaving in his staff car past a building, an outbuilding.
Wow.
And we found the outbuilding, and it's little things like that. And it was, I mean, those guys put a lot of work in, and I'm really, really grateful for them to do that. And if you go on our social media, there will be snips of Tom talking to camera, because quite frankly, I intended to do these pieces, but it was easier to give the microphone to him and let him do it, because he was the one that had done so much research into it. So it was a bit unfair for me to stand there and steal his thunder, you know.
Yeah, sure. So I got to ask you, I know you've been to Arnhem. I've been 3 times. I know for me, a very special place is the Crumb Bakery, the intersection of Paul Krugerstraat, where William Hurst was wounded. Is there a special place in Normandy where it means absolutely everything to Andy Bryant? In other words, that feeling that you get every time you're there, and it's something that you know is an important part of you.
Yeah, and I've got several. Obviously, the landing zones at Pegasus Bridge, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention those. I will always go there. But I would say, and I think I've said this before in other episodes, the Chateau Saint-Côme for me the Chateau Saint-Côme and Night Aliens action there. It was lucky we could actually get into the chalet at the Bois de Mont, as we did last year. And you can stand at where they had the dressing station in one of the outbuildings, and you can look across the lawn that runs across the back of the chalet. And there's a famous photograph of that lawn covered in crosses, you know, where they bury the dead. And you can stand, and that lawn now is a perfect garden lawn, you know, and to stand there and see how it is now to how it was back then. And Breville as well is somewhere where we went to this year more than we had done. And we will be having an episode coming up with Ben Main, who's going to come on and talk about the battle for Breville and the Breville Gap, as it was called. But that whole area, that ridge, Amfreville, Breville, Chateau Saint-Côme, leading down to Lemon Hill Crossroads, where the Canadians were, and in Brigadier Hill's headquarters, we actually managed to get into the main dressing station for 224 field ambulance, which was brilliant. I'm not going to give away too much, but we've managed to get into a lot of places. We managed to get into the MDS down at Ronville. Again, we're going to be putting some of this stuff out on our social media, but that was amazing. Absolutely amazing to see the pool table that was used for operations. There's still blood stains on the marble floor, on the tiled floor, you know.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, the blood has seeped into vials, and I've got photographs, and again, a little bit on our social media.
Let me ask you this then. I'm planning my trip. I'm going there, and obviously I'm going to hit the biggies, Maryville Battery. I'm going to go to Pegasus. Give me either a battle site or a location or something, maybe our listeners, someplace that is like off the beaten path kind of thing. Something that is significant that maybe a lot of people kind of overlook.
I would recommend going to several places, but the bridges over the Deves, they're to the east.
Yeah.
Get out there, go to Trouan, see the bridge, go to Beulah, see those bridges that were actually destroyed by the 8th Battalion and the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion. Get up to Varaville, see the gatehouse, see the bridge over the Divette that was blown by the Canadians and the Royal Engineers. Get out there, get to see those places. But also as well, get to Amfreville. Amfreville is famous for the Commando farm, because obviously the Commandos took over from the 9th Battalion, and the 9th Battalion moved on to the Chateau Saint-Côme. For the first time, we went to where the Chateau at Amfreville was. We went to the grounds, and you can still see some of the footings, the walls, and some of the outbuildings that were still there. The chateau itself was now gone. But there was an action there on the 6th and 7th of June with 9th Battalion, you know, before they were relieved by the Commandos. It was so fierce that Otway himself was considering surrender. Get out to those sorts of places. We managed to get into the Bois de Bavon, where the 8th Battalion were. We didn't get very far into it. We managed to see the memorial, and we went a little bit into the actual woods itself. Get to those sorts of places. Bob's Farm, which was an action with the 7th Battalion, and they fought over that farm backwards and forwards for weeks. Get to those sort of things. It's not all about Pegasus Bridge and Merville Battery. I mean, obviously, we stayed at Merville Battery a week, and I loved it, and it was surreal being there. And it was, as I was saying to you earlier on our last night, we sat in the middle of Merville Battery, and we were the only ones there. We were the last ones to leave. And as the sun went down, we listened to Neil's episode from the podcast talking about Merville Battery. That was a surreal experience, sitting there listening to that, actually being on the battery itself. But yeah, get out to the bridges, get down to, you know, an Esquiville, you know, Hiravalette, you know, the brickworks at Lemon Hill, where the Canadians were. There's some really good tour guide books out there. Pick up Neil's books and find these places. They're there to be found. You know, do your research and get out there.
So how much better is your understanding of the events that happened on June 6th because you've been there and you've seen it? I get it. I know 81 years, things have changed, roads are different. I get that. But there's still the essence of still understanding of what transpired 80 years ago is still there.
Yeah, I've said this before. And some of the other lads were saying as well, if you read the books, you have this mental image in your head about where things are. Or you make things up in your head as where you think they are, or you look on a map. But until you walk on the ground, you don't realize how close these things are, and you don't realize how interlinked everything is and the reasons why this was an objective, or it was really important to blow that bridge or to hold that chateau or whatever. until you're out there walking the ground. And you also, as well, you can put two and two together. For example, there was a photograph of Private Durston, who was A Company, Night Battalion, part of GB Force, a little battery, the ones that were supposed to go in with the gliders and land actually on the battery. And there's a famous photograph of him with a German prisoner just outside Amfreville, and there's a barn in the background. It's on a crossroads. You come down from Amfreville, and the barn is at the bottom. There's a famous photograph of him with this German prisoner. And you often wonder, what's he doing there? Why is he there with this German prisoner? And then the guys had done some research, and there was a dressing station just literally on that crossroads. So in the photographs that you've got of Private Durston with this German prisoner, the German prisoner's got a bandage on his head. So it's highly likely that he was being escorted to the dressing station. Yeah, there's no substitute for walking the ground.
It is an extraordinary feeling, isn't it? When you do walk the ground and after you've read the book and then everything starts to coalesce.
Absolutely.
I got to ask you, we saw the photos. What's it like carrying the Bren?
The lads who were there in 44 carried it for miles and miles and miles over 3 months. Yeah, 52, it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
We took part in parts of the Commando March. France 44 is the group, the French Living History group, who we were guests of. And they do a walk from Sword Beach to Pegasus Bridge, recreating that march. And then from Pegasus Bridge up to Ampreville and the Commando Farm, which is where they relieved 9th Battalion Parachute Regiment. So we did this sort of ceremonial handover. We were there at Pegasus Bridge in our British airborne gear, and we met the commandos in the middle of the bridge, and they stopped all the traffic, and they have this sort of, recreation of the handover sort of thing. I'm not quite sure it was how it would have been on the day, but yeah, it's more like a ceremonial sort of type, you know. And then 3 of us joined the commandos for the march up to Ampreville, and that was really good. I mean, I wasn't supposed to be carrying the Bren gun, I was carrying my number 4. But one of our lads was having a slight problem with his boots and his feet. He didn't have a very good pair of fitting boots, so he was struggling. And of course, the other thing as well is that, and I'm going to have to tell this story because I've told you now, and is that about a mile into the march, the elastic went in my underpants.
It's funnier the second time.
So I'm marching along, and you can't stop. You can't stop. You've got sort of 50 odd commandos. 50 odd commandos marching along the river Orne. And so I thought, what am I going to do? My undercrackers are bunching up at the top of my legs, and it was really, really uncomfortable.
Wasn't it Napoleon who said no army stops for torn underwear?
If it was, he was misquoted. So anyway, the solution I came to was I've got a smock on, I've got my webbing on, I've got belt and braces, on my battle dress trousers. I can't do it. So I'm trying to, and my mates were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "My pants are coming down." And so by pants, I mean the British pants, not my trousers for the Americans. So there's button fly on the British battle dress. So I undid the button fly, and I reached in, and I literally was ripping my underpants out through my fly. But I got to a point where I couldn't actually get the elastic, would not snap. Even though it had gone, it wouldn't break. So I reached into my smock, and I have a clasp knife, and I managed to cut through the rest of my underpants. And the funny thing is, there was a photographer as a part of the march, and he was just a few guys ahead, and he kept on turning around and take photographs. So every time he did that, I was trying to hide the fact I was trying to rip my pants off. So anyway, I managed to rip my pants. I mean, that would have made a hell of a photograph, wouldn't it? Like, he turns around and all these commandos there, and there's an airborne guy pulling these skivvies out through his fly, so I managed to cut them, and I ripped my pants.
Knickers.
Yeah. So I managed to get my pants off and stuff them inside my Bren gun pouch. But and then from that moment on, I was more worried about friction burns on my butt cheeks than anything else. So I literally went commando, right?
You went commando with the commandos.
I literally went commando with the commandos.
Oh, that is fabulous. That is fabulous. So you're home now. You've had some time to reflect. What's your big takeaway?
That moment's going to live with me until the day I die. And the lads thought it was absolutely hilarious. My big takeaway is doing your research before you go. I thought I'd done some research, just reading books and watching documentaries. But as I say, Tom and Rob excelled themselves with the research they did, and they really made that trip for me. The other thing I'd say is make sure you got a good bunch of blokes when you go out with you, and everyone's like-minded. You've got to all be like-minded. You've all got to be there because you want to do the history. It isn't about cosplay. It isn't about just strutting around in the uniform. You've got to be interested. You've got to know a little bit about what you're going out there for. And the other big takeaway, I guess I'm going to say, is if you're going to do that sort of walk in the ground, you're actually probably better off not going when it's a big anniversary, or going before or after the anniversary, because you'll get a heck of a lot more done.
Yeah, I would agree. Having been at the 75th and the 80th of Arnhem, and there's nothing wrong with those anniversaries. It's just there is a lot going on, and it's just you're right. It is. It's a lot easier. It's easier to move around.
Definitely.
Certainly Normandy's on my bucket list. I need to get over there.
Well, there's always next year, buddy.
For sure. So what do we got coming up content-wise? I know one of the things I'm looking forward to is, and you and I have discussed this before, is we're going to have an Operation Dragoon episode.
We are?
Because I think 2nd Parachute Brigade often gets short shrifted. You have 6th Airborne Division in Normandy. You have 1st Airborne Division, and next thing you know, the Bulge. And I don't think 2nd Brigade gets nearly the love as far as with the Southern invasion of France. And I think we're definitely, you and I are going to sit down and have a chat about that.
Yep, absolutely.
And I know you and I are excited too about our personality series. We've got something really interesting coming up, don't we?
Yeah, we've got John Greenacre's going to come on and talk about Napier Crookenden. He took over from Otway, the 9th Battalion.
And that's really interesting because that's one of those personalities you don't hear a lot about, and I'm glad that we are delving into that, getting into these personalities and the types that were leading these folks, leading these battalions. So I was really happy with how our Browning material came out. And I think it's important to understand the men and understand how they are able to do what they're doing. Is you need to look at their leadership.
Oh, yeah. It starts at the top.
Oh, definitely. And I think, too, as we talked about, and we've talked about with Mike Peters, too, is the leadership in a regiment, whether it's a Glider Pilot Regiment or in a battalion, whether it's like night. Again, this British Airborne concept is not very old. There's no historical culture. This isn't the Black Watch. This isn't the Guards. It's all very new, and it's developing its culture and its history as it's happening. And that's what I find truly extraordinary.
Oh, yeah, it's the progression. That's what fascinates me from the very early days of basically copying the Germans through to surpassing what the Germans were capable of.
Yes.
And, what it ended up at the end of the war. It's completely different.
It really is, isn't it? Again, for our listeners, in September, we're going to have an Arnhem series. Yep. We're going to look at it from a different angle. We're hoping to get John O'Reilly. If anyone is familiar with him, his first book that came out was about 156 Para, From Delhi to Arnhem. It's just an extraordinary book. If our listeners don't have a copy of that, they better run out right now and get a copy.
Yeah.
And there's Andy rubbing salt in a wound because he's got John's third book.
You mentioned John's books, and funny enough, waiting for me on the doorstep when I just got back from Normandy was John's latest book, which is Lindsay's Paratroopers, which is a very hefty tome, if I do say so. India, Sicily, Serbia, Italy, D-Day, Arnhem, and Line Crossing. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. Just the pictures alone and maps. Diagrams are fantastic. I can't wait to get my teeth into that one.
Because John's father was in 156. And I don't know about you, Andy, but I really have come to enjoy our episodes with the family members. It's extraordinary to be able to listen to these family members talk about, whether it was Carrie talking about Papa Howard or Jane talking about her father. I mean, it is really extraordinary learning the stories and learning about who these men were outside of what they did. That's what's really interesting. So that should be good. And I know we're going to have a friend of mine over here in the States, Jan Heiting. Jan is Dutch by birth, and Jan has lived the first few years of his life in Arnhem. So for our Arnhem series, we're actually going to give the perspective of what it's like growing up there. He comes to the United States, spent most of his life here. He lives here, has a business here. And then what it's like for him going back to that place that you and I know hold very dear. But imagine you're born there. You've understood what that is. You understand how the Dutch culture treats Arnhem and how it treats every September. So that's going to be really interesting, I think.
Yeah. And someone else I reached out to and we've got coming on to do an episode is Mark Green, who has written a book recently about the VCs awarded for Arnhem. So he's going to come on. That's going to be part of our Arnhem series as well. So we've got about four episodes lined up, Arnhem themed.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to ask him how much research he did into recipients that were declined to VC. Because, oh my gosh.
You're thinking Mike Dauncey, aren't you?
You know who I'm thinking about.
Yeah, the VC that never was. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
So we've got some exciting stuff coming up.
And of course, and I will mention it as well, because we'll wrap this up in a second, because this really was an off the cuff spitballing episode. But the other thing we've got to do is name our virtual pub.
Yeah, we do. Yes, we've been remiss in that.
We've been getting a lot of really great suggestions. We've got a couple on the short list, but what it boils down to is that we really would like to do it as a live stream and actually have the listeners taking part and try and get some special guests to join us as well. So it's not just us waffling on. We would like to do that. So it's really just a logistical thing of timing and sorting out the logistics of it, because Kev and I are new to this podcasting lot, and we've really been learning it as we go.
This isn't my day job.
No, and editing and social media and promotion is not my day job normally, but we've learned a lot as we've gone along.
That is very true. And I do have to say this. I understand we're kind of just spitballing here, but I do want to give a great thank you to all of the listeners who make their comments and who help us on our social media, and for taking the time to listen to two blokes just kind of ramble on. And it's great fun. And we don't do it for any publicity or anything. We just do it because it's for the listeners, for the folks that just hopefully our podcast gets them to maybe buy a book here, do more research, then maybe they make a trip. That's what we really want to achieve with this podcast. And I can't thank the listeners enough for taking the time to choose us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And leading on from that, as Kev says, we don't do it for a recognition. We don't do it for money or whatever. However, if you can support us on our buymeacoffee.com page, we'd be very grateful, even if it was just a couple of quid a month. There are costs, as I've said before, to running a podcast. And at the moment, Kev and I are coming out of our own pockets, which, again, we don't mind. We're not doing it for the money. But anything, if you could support us, we would really appreciate it. We do understand that in today's climate, people can't always monetarily support podcasts and channels and stuff. So if you could see your way to leave a comment, subscribe. I know it's the same old things, like, subscribe, follow, whatever you're listening to us on. But I can't stress enough, it really, really does help the algorithm, and it really does help to get us at the top of search engines and things like that, and getting the message out there. So if you listen to this podcast, whatever you've listened to it on, just leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe if it's on YouTube, follow if it's on Spotify, whatever. It really, really does help. And we really, really do appreciate it, because we want to know what you think as well. Good and bad suggestions. We want to hear what you've got to say. Let's get some debate going. So anyway, mate, I think we've waffled for long enough, don't you?
I think we have. Yeah. And I know I looked over a little bit, and the Gov is like, he's pointing at his watch, and he's like, I know he's wanting to close, so we probably better wrap this one up. So, my friend, welcome back from France.
Thanks, mate. So we're going to call time, gentlemen, please, on this impromptu episode of the Ham and Jam podcast, and say cheers.
Cheers.
And ham and jam.
Ham and jam.
Thanks for listening to Ham and Jam. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help Andy and Kevin make more, please support us on buymeacoffee.com.
Lived out there for 8 years. It's a dog bar.
Yeah, that's Frankie.
Yeah.